Hey, everybody. My name is Jordan. I'm the host of the Technology Leadership Podcast presented by Celigo. I'm joined with my wonderful co host, Mark Simon, who's the VP of Strategy over here at Celigo, and Ganesh, who is the CTO and co founder of Atomic, which is a community management and engagement platform. Really excited to have you here, Ganesh. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Jordan, for inviting me.
Absolutely. Well, I wanted to start out with a question that to me is interesting to ask any technical folks, but more specifically co-founders. Ganesh, could you tell us a little bit about um, not only like your own personal story for founding a business and becoming the technical CTO, but also why Atomic exists? I'll kind of leave that open ended, and we'll go from there.
Well, I guess it's going to be a little long answer. I started my career as a software engineer, like most of the people that I work with do. Joined Microsoft way back in 2005 and worked primarily for the Skype business. Did a lot of stuff there. About 11 years, 11, 12 years at Microsoft, I kind of got bored of big companies. So I was thinking what I should do next, and found this startup called OfferUp. It's a marketplace app, and they were kind of hiring for new roles, and I joined OfferUp. I was a dev manager in Microsoft, but joining a startup as an engineer was another challenge. So, and then the funny story I say that is because I work with Microsoft technologies, right from my laptop. Everything is Microsoft, and then I go to this OfferUp startup. The first day they gave me an Apple laptop, and I couldn't even figure out where my right click is. So I was that bad. But I survived. I survived and spent 3 years there. And also, I got an opportunity to work in a B2B startup called Ally, which is now acquired by Microsoft. So I joined as a VP of engineering at Ally, and I was basically responsible for creating a team in India, a dev team in India. So did that, grew Ally to be about 50, 60 people there in India. And then at that time, I was thinking, okay, I worked in a consumer startup like OfferUp and also in a B2B startup like Ally. So I was kind of itching to start something on my own. So I quit my job there and started a startup with basically a startup accelerator called Venture Out. Um, did that for a couple of months, didn't go anywhere. And then my ex-colleague from Ally, Matt Worm, he reached out to me and he said he's on a similar boat where he quit his job at Ally and he was looking to start something on the revenue operations side. And he said, hey, do you want to join? Said, okay, why not? And we just did a few things and then quickly raised a seed round based on what we were doing. So we got some funding, we built a team. So the product was in the revenue operations space. So what we thought, okay, if we have a product, we need people to know about it. And we built a community in Slack called Rev Ops Co-op. And that's how we started with the Slack community. uh, 2 years fast forward, the product kind of didn't go anywhere. We couldn't get like a product market fit. But the community grew like crazy. We Without any big efforts from our side, it's now at 8,000 people. And uh, I think just before I would say 2022, early 2022, we decided to stop working on the product side of things and focus on the community side of things and figure out how to build the community in Slack. And that's when we figured doing everything manually, like someone joining a community, we have to go welcome them. When someone says like a keyword that we are looking for, we got to look at every Slack message and answer them. It was super time consuming. So we started to build Atomic for ourselves. And that's how we got started on Atomic. We said, okay, we need some automation to solve the problems we are facing in scaling this Rev Ops Corp community. And we started to build Atomic for that. And it worked very well. And we started talking about it with some of the other people on the community side. And that's when we realized some of the problems we are facing, they're also similar to some other people facing them who are starting their community. So we basically created a product out of what we were doing, the automation that we built. And right now it is it's essentially like think of it as a workflow automation for your community. Atomic is essentially automating some of the workflows you would do if you have a community in Slack. And we are adding more and more features based on what we are feeling and also what our customers are saying.
That's
So
awesome.
I'm sorry, that's a long answer to your question.
Yeah. No, that's perfect. Go ahead, Mark. Sorry.
Ganesh, that's really interesting, and bringing that automation to that space. Now, is it really focused on that? You kind of mentioned some of those first steps, like that onboarding of a community member, but how far does it go? How far does the automation go? Do you get into moderation, et cetera? Where does it fit in kind of that whole life cycle?
Yeah, I think it does go into things beyond just welcoming onboarding. So I'll tell you a couple of places where we are using ourselves. One is where I think you brought up moderation. So we have like a emoji-based moderation control where if someone says picks an emoji, if enough people click on that emoji for a message, then it gets moderated based on what the community manager wants. We also have sequences where our own community works with partners. So we have Rev Ops Corp has partners where they basically plan events around what's happening in the community. So we have something called topics. So we look for what people are discussing in the community and figure out what events we should create for our partners. So for example, if someone is talking more about lead generation, we create call it a keyword tracker for those words. And if it crosses a threshold, we work with our partners to let them know and create an event around lead generation. I think some of those workflows. And one other thing that we are doing is also one of the things we like with 8,000 people, we don't know who's expertise, who is expert in certain areas. So if someone asks a questions and there's no answer, we want to engage the community. So we want to know more about our own members. What Atomic does is a feature called tagging, where if, let's say, you mentioned something about sales compensation, you can automatically tag Mark with, hey, he knows about sales compensation, and keep tagging them. So when you want to find a list of people that are experts in a certain area, you get that list automatically from the app.
Oh, got it. So it sounds like you're actually your tool Atomic is actually automatically tagging a poster based on the content they're doing. You're matching that up. So that's all based on what content is, not what a poster says they know, but actually what they know is proven by what they posted.
Exactly. And this helps us in a lot of things, like one, in creating more engagement. Two, if we are planning an event, we want to know who to invite to. And so, I mean, you mentioned Seattle area, you're from Seattle area. So if in most of the interaction, we see that people mention where they are from, and Atomic automatically picks up their location. And if we are planning an event in, say, Los Angeles, we can just look up who's in Los Angeles and go invite them.
So I have a question, Ganesh. This tool sounds like you're about to be purchased by Reddit, which is a good thing, because and when I say that, I was being a little facetious, but it seems like places where communities thrive, Reddit. I know you guys already are coming out with an integration with Discord, which is a huge community place. Even Facebook or Twitter. It seems like large businesses who have huge communities around them would absolutely kill for a tool like this. And I'm curious if this is something that you're building to remain on its own, or is this something that you see like mass widespread adoption from large social communities, whether it's Reddit, Discord, Facebook, what have you? Like how do you plan on seeing this, or not how do you plan, but where do you see Atomic growing to down the line?
Yeah, we are still in our early days. Right now, Atomic works only on Slack. Yeah, we are thinking about adding to Discord and maybe a few other places where people are building the communities. So in terms of growth, one way is to kind of go beyond Slack and look at other places. There are a couple of areas we are thinking about our next steps in terms of growth. One is the other platforms, but we also find that most of the community managers want a monetization model. So one of the things we are looking at is how can Atomic, because we know all the content in it, can we create a monetization model around content that helps the community manager? And we're going to start with Slack, but if that works, then as you said, it can go to other platforms. Then I think ChatGPT is something that everyone talks about these days. It's like if you don't have ChatGPT, no one even looks at your messages. But it is something that we are experimenting with. So, for example, again, we have lots of content in Slack. So we are experimenting in a way where we are creating like a Q&A bot based on your Slack conversations. If someone asks a question, it can look up your Slack conversations and respond and give pointers to the correct conversations. And another one is like you might know this, like if you have a community, you want to create this blog posts and things that content around the community for people to know what's happening, and also kind of gaining interest. So we are also creating a place where using ChatGPT, how do you create content based on what the conversations happening in Slack? So if you kind of look beyond what we are doing today, one of the things we do have is the content that is in the community, and we are figuring out how can we use this content in a way that helps community manager monetize this content.
Interesting. That's really cool. I'm wondering if I mean, letting the moderator monetize it seems like a great path to go down. I'm wondering if you eventually see monetization for the actual like members of the community. For example, if someone becomes, let's say they're the API expert of the group, and people always trust them for API questions or things like that. Is there a way that the individual contributors will ever get some kind of pay or be rewarded or monetized for helping build the communities? I wonder if that, because that's, I don't know, I always see like, there's the people on Yelp who go review restaurants and all they get is a star by their name. And it's always confusing me because you're going out, spending money, paying for gas, paying for food, and all you get is a star in return. But it seems like with a really engaged community, you might be able to compensate those who help build.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up that point. My co-founder Matt was asking a very similar question. Is like, okay, you can monetize, you can help monetize community managers. Can you also help monetize members who are like experts? One of the things that has come up on our side is education. There are experts in the community who has their own education on certain topics. They have courses, and if we can find a way for them to monetize based on this, that will be great. So it has definitely come up on something that we are looking into.
Awesome.
Okay.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry, Mark.
Oh, I was going to ask something actually really simple. I was going to zoom out a little bit because, we often throw a lot of terms around in technology and business, and I'm going to use, and I'm going to home in on Rev Ops here, and that's something that I think 5 years ago was maybe the first time Rev Ops kind of got on my radar as being like, okay, what's this? And working in a software company, you get exposed to this and the lingo that's going around. But thinking about the more general business community, how would you describe Rev Ops being a newer business term over the last few years? How would you describe someone that's out there in the business community, or a technologist isn't really familiar with what that means, just to kind of put sort of clarification and boundaries, or what is Rev Ops, what isn't, and maybe it's what isn't Rev Ops. How would you describe that, Ganesh?
Yeah, Rev Ops stands for revenue operations. So traditionally, B2B companies have three main go-to-market teams. One is sales, the other is marketing, and the customer success. Sales and marketing, marketing focuses on brand new customers. Customer success focus on people who renew, like renewals, and sales does a bit of both. What was happening is that these three teams had slightly different goals. And as a B2B company, the marketing will be focused on marketing and give like bunch of leads to sales for follow up. But if those lead quality is not great, marketing will claim, oh, we got so many leads, but the sales couldn't convert. But the sales team would be saying, oh, the leads quality was not great. So there are so many back and forths like that, which caused the company's growth to be like it slowed down the whole thing. Because of that, there was a need for someone who oversees all three things, not necessarily managing them. It's not a managerial role, but someone who has an understanding of all three areas and focused on revenue, whether it is new business or renewals. So that was the focus of Rev Ops manager, and that's how the role got formed. And quickly, it kind of, when we started our own Rev Ops co-op, it was still rather new. But once it got success in a few B2B companies, it just got picked up by all other B2B companies. Now most of the companies have a Rev Ops manager. They have a Rev Ops team, and Rev Ops manager is the first role they hire to, and then they have other roles in the team as well.
Thank you, Ganesh. I appreciate that, because I think we've got some listeners that be like, okay, they hear the term, but they're like, what really is that? And how is that different? But how would you describe what's the difference between, say, sales ops and Rev Ops? Where do those, do they have overlap? How do those interrelate between each other?
Yeah. Actually, one of the things that you'll see is if you go look at someone who is a Rev Ops manager, and if you look at things that they did before, most of them come from a sales ops background or a marketing ops background. So the biggest difference between sales ops and Rev Ops is, for sales ops, they focus on tools like Salesforce, anything that it comes in the sales ambit, like Salesforce, HubSpot, a few other things on the sales side. But Rev Ops, since they go across, they have to not only focus on, say, for example, Salesforce, but they also have to figure out tie it back to the subscription. Maybe if it's a subscription business, they have to tie it back to Zora or ChargeBee or whatever Stripe, wherever they're maintaining subscriptions. And they also have to tie it back to the product to see what's the product usage. So if a customer coming from, so let's say we have a lead from a particular channel coming through the web, and how soon do they become a customer? What is their average product usage? What's their average product usage, and tied back to the lifetime value of that customer. So they have to kind of go across. So they work with sales ops people to get the data that they need and the automations they need, but they also have to work with customer CS and marketing.
Sounds like a very challenging role. And I just want to be clear and clear the air. Celigo has never, our marketing team has never provided a low quality lead to sales. It's never happened.
Wow.
I promise.
You don't need a Rev Ops manager there.
Nah.
Very, very critical clarification there, Jordan.
Yes. If you're listening. No, so I have a question. I've been in the API business for quite a while. I worked at a few companies that deal with APIs. And something, I'm not technical, so probably both of you guys can answer this question. But the thing that I always hear, especially from a marketing or sales side of things, is building integrations is incredibly challenging. It's not only challenging to build it, but also to maintain it. And I'm looking at the integrations page on atomic.com. If you're listening, check it out. And there's a lot of coming soon. And I'm wondering, in maybe both your experiences, Ganesh as a builder and Mark as a leader, how much of a pain is building and maintaining integrations, and why? I think some of our listeners might be interested in that.
Yeah. I also come from an API background. In the Skype team, I was responsible for creating the API to interact with Skype. So I do know a little bit about building and maintaining an integration. Just the authentication part of it is a pain. And then every time there is an API change, you got to keep up with it and keep changing the code. So it is difficult. And there are some products in the market that claim to solve this. I haven't played with them a lot, but building an integration and maintaining it is a challenging thing. So we internally have a few integrations. One of the things that I notice is that if it's a mature platform, the integration maintenance is a little on the lower side. If it's not a mature platform, you do have to spend a lot of time to maintain it. Most of them have like API limits, the rate limits, and other things. So everything will be different. So if you start out building integrations, keep all of those things in mind, and create an architecture where it is easy to maintain, is what I would suggest.
Awesome. Mark, on your end, what would you
well answer? Actually, I have a follow-up question for Ganesh. You mentioned the the maturity there has a big impact. You're referring to the maturity of the API you're connecting to, right?
Yes.
So
yes.
Yeah. So if you're connecting to an API that's less mature, it's relatively new for that product, then you're expecting that it's going to evolve more rapidly, and thus there's going to be more changes, potentially breaking changes, etc., versus using a really well established API that's maybe been around for several years. It's not going to, very unlikely that company is going to be making breaking changes to their API because they've got maybe thousands of customers using it, right? So
yeah, true. And one other thing that I see with little bit mature APIs is they also offer like an SDK in different languages. So you don't have to write a lot of code to create those SDKs. So you can just use them.
Interesting. Well, thank you. That definitely helps clarify. And yeah, sorry. I always like to get people's perspective on integrations and API in particular. Go ahead, Mark. It looked like you're going to say something.
And so back to the question, the question you were asking me, Jordan.
Yeah.
What was the question again?
Just like, why is building and maintaining integrations such a pain? And you're in a strong leadership position at Sligo. You've probably heard this from a whole bunch of customers, and so I wanted to get the technical side of things from Ganesh, but maybe, I don't know, just your side of things for this is essentially asking, why does Sligo exist?
Yeah, and it's a great question, because this really gets to the heart of a lot of misconceptions around integration, I think. And I've seen this. Obviously, I've seen it from the Sligo side across several thousand customers, but I've also seen it, having a PS practice, building integration, so building it for clients, and then on the other side, actually, building them internally, as a critical part of operations. So it's kind of, you end up sort of coming into it with a different perspective depending on which one of those roles you have. And the really where I've kind of landed and how I really try to describe to people, particularly like customers that are new to it, is to think about, the integration and automation is something that comes at the end of a lot of work. It's essentially like building a house in a way. And you have to have a solid foundation for a house. And one of those foundations is solid business processes. Do you have a good understanding of your business processes? Are they solid? How mature are they? We know businesses need to change and change, be more accommodating to change due to an ever more dynamic world. But you really need to know what your processes are and have those, at least a solid understanding of those. And then on top of that, you've got your systems that you're connecting. Have you actually implemented your systems? Are they right? Do you have a good understanding of? And that's the Ganesh, you mentioned, challenges using nascent APIs, right? That's part and parcel. That's the interface to an endpoint. And if that's not mature, you're gonna struggle with it. But all these things stack up, and then on top of it, you get to build your integrations. But one of the things I've seen really repeatedly is that oftentimes the integration really acts as the early warning system for business or for these processes that you're automating. So it shows up, a problem shows up in the integration. Oh, if there's a problem, something's broken the contract. You get errors there because the contracts have been broken. And then you've got to go back and figure out, is it a change management issue? Did the business process change? Did it slip in? Did an endpoint get modified without someone assessing the impact on the integration and the automation? And so it automating tends to automate successfully really lifts up the operational rigor of whatever group it may be, whether it's a company automating internally or whether you're a software company now and you're automating to your product into other solutions. It always tends to kind of force upward your operational diligence, so to speak, and kind of forces a maturity. And sometimes companies are ready for that, and sometimes they're not. And it kind of comes in; they have to get dragged into there. But that's generally kind of one of the most challenging things around integration I see in growing organizations, whether they're either side, whether a product company or a company using it internally.
That's awesome. Thank you. Yeah, it's a great perspective from both of you, just because, again, as not a technical person, I know a lot about APIs. I've dealt with them for a long time, but to hear kind of the nuanced perspective is super helpful to probably myself, and I'm assuming hopefully the listeners, if they've made it this far. So thank you, listeners, for listening. Well, let's change gears. I want to switch it up. Something that I like to do during these podcasts, Ganesh, is Mark has probably heard me say this a million times, but I like to make C-level, VP level founder folks seem human. I think a lot of times they're kind of viewed as this, higher power that, they're not real people. They're, robotic, and you've got to change the oil on them every 5,000 miles. And, they're kind of robots essentially. In doing this podcast, the thing that I've learned with talking to so many senior folks is, I kind of already knew it, but you guys are real people. You have life outside of work. You have families. You have hobbies, passions, interests. Completely outside of work, Ganesh, what do you like to do? What are you interested in learning about? How do you have fun? How do you blow off steam?
Yeah, for me, it's hiking and a little bit of mountaineering. So Seattle area is just spoiled for hiking places. If you go out, like drive for 15 minutes, you get into this I-90 corridor where you have mountain after mountain that you can just go hike on. And recently, last year, I climbed all the way up to Mount Rainier to the top.
Wow.
And a year before that, I went to Kilimanjaro. So I've been keeping myself busy outside of work with hiking. That's the most. That's where most of my time goes, outside of work.
That's awesome. That's really good to hear. And Ganesh, we have something in common. We both went to Kilimanjaro. I did not even try
Nice.
climbing it, but I did go to it. I saw it. And I think something that you'll find in common is Mark is a huge outdoorsman, if you will. A lot of hiking, biking, and skiing. Is that correct, Mark?
Yes, and I've done a lot of mountaineering and climbing as well, on several continents, but never in Africa. So that has eluded me. So, we'll have to compare notes sometime, Ganesh. Kilimanjaro is on my list of things I'd love to climb. So, definitely.
So I think we're all climbing Mount Kilimanjaro like next year is what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
I'll book us a hotel.
So Ganesh, you were telling your story about the beginning of your path that you took to becoming a CTO and co-founder of Atomic, and you mentioned, like a lot of people, you started out as a software engineer, and it made me think about something, having started my career in a similar fashion as a software engineer, and having worked with a lot of young software engineers, people right out of school starting their careers, and always interesting to see their different ambitions, and with several of them who would say, hey, I want to co-found, I want to found something, I want to be a founder, I want to be a CTO someday. And having gone through that journey, I want to know, what are your words of wisdom? What advice would you give somebody that's coming from that kind of technical background and wants to be a founder and a CTO someday?
Well, I don't know if I'm qualified to answer that question, but I'll give you my perspective either way.
I think you're more qualified than just about anybody. So,
let me see. So for me, it was more like a path where it's a little bit, I played it safely, I would say. So if you think about it, I worked more than a few years at Microsoft. So financially, I was okay, even if I don't get any money in the companies that we work on. It's not a big deal for me. My wife is working, so we have something coming on. So on the finances side, I was okay. And then I also did work in a couple of startups before trying out something. So I kind of knew what happens in like a little bit stage, like a later stage startup like OfferUp, and also early stage startup like Ally. So I had that background. I knew what to expect when I started this. When I started with Matt, what to expect in a startup, goes through ups and downs. So for example, we had to completely shut off the product that we built, let go of all the engineers we had. It was not like something brand new. But there are also, I've seen many people who have started out straight out of college or work a little bit and then start straight out of college. So it has its pros and cons. And I feel like you will know if you want to start something, you will know there'll be like something that tells you, and you should give it a try. If I have to change something, I would have done this little earlier in my career, and even if whether it worked out or not, I would have tried this early in my career. So if you're watching this and if you think you're even like you want to do something like around this, go try it out. It's okay. I mean, if it doesn't work out, you can always come back to the industry and pick up where you left. So should try it out.
That's a fantastic answer. And just to kind of corroborate what you're saying, I tried to start a business outside of college and it failed. So that's why I'm here being a social media manager. I want to just piggyback off that, Mark, before we keep going.
Sure.
Ganesh, if there are 3 qualities that a co-founder should embody, whether it's a small startup or a big startup or full-fledged company, what are like 3 qualities that you really you try to put forward and show your employees every single day?
3 qualities. I'll talk about myself being specifically. One is I had to unlearn a lot of things coming from a corporate world. So, for example, we had to build a product in less than 3 weeks, and if I had used all the stuff I learned at Microsoft, I wouldn't have built a product even in 3 months. So I had to kind of figure out, okay, what is a minimum viable product and what's the quickest way to get there. So I think the one of the qualities I would say is figure out where your startup is, what are your business needs is. If you're an engineer coming from an engineering background, you know all the engineering stuff, but you need to have a sense of where the business is and build the engineering stuff based on where the business and where it wants to go. So that's number one. Number two is, I think it's related to that. Look like if you have a problem or you're trying to create a product and there are like integrations that you talked about, if there is a company like Celigo or some other company which has already done most of it, use that. Don't try to build everything from scratch. It's going to slow you down. And one of the things that you'll realize is as the startup moves, a lot of things that you initially thought will be the killer feature probably will not end up being. So you would have to either rewrite it or throw away a lot of code. So don't try to spend and build everything by yourself. That's number two. And number three is, I think again related to that, which is like be humble. The code, sometimes when you write code and build something, you get attached to that. But in a startup, a lot of things change, like almost on a daily basis. So don't get attached. Be humble in terms of, okay, even if something doesn't work out, it's okay, and keep moving on, and create new things.
That's awesome. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Well, listen, we're kind of coming up on about half an hour, and I don't want to take up too much time from everybody's day. So I think we're going to wrap this up. But just to all of our listeners, thank you for listening to the Technology Leadership Podcast. Ganesh, you have been fantastic as a guest. Really appreciate you talking about all things Atomic, all things API. And Mark Simon, my fantastic co-host, thank you as usual for being here. Stay tuned, folks. We'll be back in a week or two with a new episode of the podcast, and we'll see you all around. Thank you so much for being here, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.